Back to my my podcast. This or my content this past week. Again, I thank you guys so much for your feedback. I do also want to address some things about certain people who have been commenting, and that's the devil's advocates. And I'm finding it's a weird thing to process how people can defend this stuff. For example, with the whole Gaga thing and Marina Abramovic, I had and this person was pretty, I think this person was purely inquisitive about the whole thing because she was like a follower of Marina's and followed her art and stuff like that. And she was trying to understand why this would come under so much criticism, why her art would come under so much criticism. And my basic reply was, self-harm is not okay. Self-harm is not art. Blood is not art. And to normalize that is, it's not right. The self-harm should never be considered an art piece, or it should never be considered, this type of media for like an exhibition or anything like that. And, of course we couldn't come to an agreement, and, this individual was trying to argue that, not necessarily argue, she was just giving me her point of view, but she was trying to say that, self-harm for the purpose of coping and self-harm for the purpose of art is different. And I can't process that. I don't understand, because I in my mind, that's not okay. Like, that's not finding any sort of limitation. That's not, pushing yourself to certain heights or anything like that. And so anyway, that was one. And to that, like, that, I understand that devil advocacy, because, like, not understand it, like, I agree with it, but I understand where she was coming from. And she was trying to have a very, like, civil conversation about it. And I just can't entertain further conversations about self-harm, like, as if it's acceptable. Or I find, like, that there's no debate about that, so I chose to back away from that conversation, or from the introduction of a debate, because I just find that that stuff is not cool. It's not cool to, self-harm yourself, or, portray, like, cannibalism and, human gore as art. It's not, I don't think that should be normalized. And then some other devil's advocates I've been getting recently are from the Pedo Swim, and that has been a very interesting thing to look through. But yeah, as you would imagine, there are people who actually think that this type of stuff is funny, that this is an acquired type of comedy. And to me, that's like saying pedophilia is an acquired, pedophilia is an acquired taste. And that's not acceptable. That's not, because the content that I showed on the Pedo Swim, docu was, a lot of it was consistently, like, pedophilic themed. And maybe these creators do have other pieces of content. Maybe they do have other videos out there that are not pedo, related. But the fact that they consistently sprinkle in, these pieces where it's pedophilic themed, or pedophilic sourced theme for their theme of that show, it just, it should make you think, like, why are you consistently making these pieces? Why are you consistently, storyboarding and, these people? It takes several people to make a show. It takes a graphic designer, an animator, a voiceover, a producer, director, a storyboard, sessions, and, it takes a lot to make an episode. So, you know, if you're going through multiple processes of doing that, then you should start questioning, okay, why are y'all so interested in making this type of content? I think that should be a natural question. But to say stuff like, you know, you're being so prude about it, it's like, there should be no question about pedophilia. There should be no argument of prudeness about that. That's crazy. Be sure you understand what you're putting yourself behind, because if you're essentially, you know, leveraging these creators to create more stuff like that, and you're saying that it's funny, be sure you understand what you're backing yourself up to. Be sure that you understand that you're backing you know, this pedophilia themed stuff. Like, that's what you're backing up if you're saying that it's, you know, truly comedy. It's like saying, you know, it's like saying, you know, this type of comedy isn't for everybody. I've seen that comment before. It's like saying this pedophilia isn't for everybody. That doesn't make it right. Pedophilia does not make it right. So anyway, I find it weird that people would even, you know, go to the extent to defend this type of content. And I actually had a really interesting comment that really made me scratch my head, like, why are you making an argument for this so extensively? So, and even to a point where I'm like, someone needs to go look into this man, because if he's over here making this argument, somebody needs to protect their children. Whoever's around this man needs to really have a really keen eye on those children. So this is the comment that I'm referencing. It states, and this comes from this man named Paul, and he seems, you know, pretty mid-aged in his profile picture, and it states, "What age did you start sexual activity? Question mark. Most women start at 12, 13, 14 years old." And there I'm like, okay, pause, because, okay, first of all, I don't know about you, you know, you ladies out there, but when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, that was not even crossing my mind. The things that I was worried about is, you know, starting to do my makeup and, you know, fixing my hair certain ways, or, you know, what was the pop culture at the time, you know, what were the Spice Girls doing? Not even well, no, the Spice Girls weren't even popular anymore, but, you know, MTV, stuff like that, like watching, you know, the MTV, TRL, that's what, TRL, you know, I was not concerned. That stuff was not even crossing my mind. Like, that stuff was not even like something that I was seeking or anything like that. And, you know, for anybody who has like a normal childhood, you know, I would say that I had a normal childhood. That is not stuff that crosses your mind. Now, what I will argue is that if, you know, if you had a darker childhood, like if you were sexually molested, or if you had, like, you know, things forced on you, that's not 12, 13, 14-year-olds seeking that out. That's a grown-ass adult who is imposing, you know, these nefarious activities on these tweens and teens. That's not that little girl seeking that out. So, no, 12, 13, 14-year-olds don't just seek out, you know, sex with middle-aged men like you, Paul. 12, 13, 14-year-olds left at their natural course of their life are, you know, typically concerned about their adolescence, you know, their appearance, the current pop culture, you know, going on. Although, you know, we can question our pop culture now, because do we even have a pop culture anymore? But 12, 13, 14-year-old girls are not out seeking sex with old crusty men like you, Paul. They are not concerned about that. like I said, if they have a darker childhood, if they grew up, you know, with this stuff inflicted on them, that is not their decision. That is not something that they make on their own. It's something that is heavily imposed on them if they, you know, are forced into like sexual nature type stuff. That stuff that is influenced from the top down. Either it's by family friends, by, you know, older adults who know what they're doing. So no, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls are not out seeking that, you know, and if they are, then there's something going on with their upbringing. Their parents, you know, are not having that much supervision on them, or, you know what, but no, I would say, like, on average, that's not happening. So let's continue on. He says, most women start around 12, 13, 14 years old. You thought it was fun back then, but it's child pornography now. So what you want to be upset about is claim somebody else was responsible. Okay, let me hold on. So you're blaming 12, 13, 14-year-old girls. Let's just put it in the scenario that there is an adult out there that is coercing these girls into, you know, sexual activity, into, you know, these sexual favors or whatever, which is sick. You know, that's what's happening. But let's just give it the argument. Let's say that they are being coerced into doing these sexual acts. So you're placing blame on a victim because they're victims. They can't make decisions on their own. Their frontal lobe cortex, it does not, scientifically, biologically, anatomically, it does not form until they're, you know, mid-20s to early 30s. Okay? Like, my frontal lobe cortex, I noticed that, you know, I was like, oh, okay, the way I make decisions and the way I perceive things is completely different. You know, you truly understand, you have this cognitive way of making decisions, and it doesn't fully mature until you're like in your mid-20s to early 30s. For me personally, I'll say that probably it didn't happen until my late 20s. When I started to notice, like, oh, you know what? I'm perceiving things a bit differently now. Now I process information a lot differently. And, you know, the decisions that I make now were not decisions that I would have made even in my early 20s. You know, especially, you know, in my early tweens to teens, I was a kid. I was a child. Like, I wasn't making, I was interested in MTV and, you know, makeup, was barely getting into makeup, and you know what I mean? Like, that's not what when you're that age, that's not what you're into. So basically, again, let me take it back. You're basically placing blame on a victim should they ever engage in sexual activity because they were actually coerced by a grown-ass adult to do that. So what he's saying is, like, so you think it's fun at 12, 13, 14 when you're having sex, but now but because it's considered child pornography, you don't want to take responsibility for you having sex at 12, 13, 14 years old. Does that make sense to you? Let's continue on with Mr. Paul's comment. He says, this guilt is overreaction. So basically you should feel guilty for, you know, having sex at 12, 13, 14 years old when it's actually coerced. Based on all the other stuff that I've listed out, it's coerced. This is just a guilt overreaction. Once women get into their childbearing experience, they want to protect everybody from everything. If you can protect yourself from your past, can you protect anybody else from their present? You need to set up no norms. This man is claiming that we don't need to set up any norms. There's just so much about that has there's so many holes in this argument. And that's what I mean. Like, these are the people, these type of people are the ones who are defending pedophilia. Does that make any sense to you? Does pedophilia now seem so justified to you? There are actual arguments like this coming up that are trying to argue, like, you know, it's fine because, you know, 12, 13, 14-year-olds consent to this thing. They're not consenting. They're feeling coerced. They're feeling cornered. You know what I mean? Like, it is not something that they want to do. So he's saying, once women get into their childbearing experience, they want to protect everybody from everything. Like, do you have two brain cells to rub together? Because again, as I presented in my argument, you know, people, again, this is science. Your frontal lobe cortex is not developed until you are older. So 12, 13, 14-year-old girls don't have the ability to make, you know, or process full-on decisions. They don't know how to perceive. They can't perceive the bigger picture. They physically cannot do this. And so, you know, to his argument, you know, once women get into their childbearing stage, well, you know, I'll say like whenever that age is, let's just say on average, it's like your mid-20s to early 30s, the childbearing stage. That is exactly when, you know, not only if you are bearing children, not only do you have maternal instincts, but you also have your frontal lobe cortex developed, where you can make those decisions, where you can see and retrospectively look. Like, let's just put it in an example. If there is a sexual abuse survivor out there who, you know, gets out of that life and they, you know, regain course to like a normal life, and, you know, they retrospectively look back and they're like, you know what, that wasn't right. Like, that wasn't right that, you know, this person forced me to do that, or, you know, coerced me into that life. That wasn't right. So, yeah, they retrospectively look back. If they were ever sexually abused, they can retrospectively look back and say, you know what, that wasn't right. Yeah, now that I know what I know, and being an adult and stuff like that, I can actually be a voice for, you know, young girls that are actually in that type of life. So, you know, you set up no norms. No, we absolutely need to, we need to denormalize this. This is not normal. This is not normal comedy or, you know, behavior. This is not normal. Funny thing is, that man actually deleted, he either deleted or edited his comment, but I think he deleted it because it would say edited. He deleted that entire comment, and he actually shortened it to just this: what age did you start sexual activity? 12, 13, 14. You thought it was fun back then, but that's child pornography. So again, these people are trying to make loud noise. Look, the loudest people have the most to hide. You're trying to make this loud noise and this big argument that, you know, oh, back in when you were 12, 13, 14 years old, you know, you thought it was fun, but then you want to delete the rest of your comment. Well, if you hold strong to what you believe, why didn't you leave the rest? You know what I mean? Like, these people don't think that they're right. These people are trying to make it a norm. They don't think they're right. They don't think that this is right. They know it's wrong, but they're trying to make it a norm. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And there was another devil's advocate that was arguing that, you know, he said he only made it to 4 minutes. You saw a pedo, and also accused me of Karen-ness, like I'm being a Karen, I'm being prude, okay? And if I'm being prude against pedophilia, I'll be a prude 100%. Hell no, like, that stuff is not right. And so he's saying, I made it to 4 minutes in before the Karen-ness of the video drove me away. You saw a pedo in that clown skit? Yeah, that's on you. Well, what I have to say to you, See Me Kids 99, is that if you had two brain cells to rub together, and you actually had, you know, invested a little bit of critical thinking and saw context as to what was going on in the consistent, you know, episodes that I pointed out, there's a theme there and there is a pattern, and these people are getting away with it. Now, if you made it to 55:02 of my video, that timestamp, you'll see that the creators that are associated with this whole Adult Swim organization, one of the creators actually hid a pedo symbol in one of his comics. And so you want to come over here and tell me that I'm being a Karen, I'm being a prude. Well, if you had two brain cells to rub together and just critically think just a little bit, there's something more that's going on, and that's the entire point of the video. But you only made it to 4 minutes, you know, because you want to argue that this is actually comedy, and, you know, that this is funny, and that we're just being prudish. yeah, if you just broke it down just a little bit, you see that it's not just a guy in a clown skit. You saw kids in cages, and you saw kids being sexualized, and everything that they were saying alluded to sexual nature, servitude, as well as child enslavement and abuse and violence. And if you can't critically think, then that's really on you, not on us. It's not our fault that we can critically think through certain things like that. It's stuff like that. Again, it's like saying pedophilia isn't for everybody, and it's like pedophilia is not a norm. It's not a lifestyle. Pedophilia is wrong, and we all need to come to terms with that. And if you can't, then that's on you. Be sure you understand what you are backing up, because if you're backing up these pedophiles and you're backing up this pedophile nature, that's on you. That's not on us. Because I can assure you, from a lot of comments that I've seen and glanced over, there's a lot more people that are against this stuff than there are people who are for it. So be careful about what you're backing up. I tell you, man, it's insane. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that clip. This clip comes from a bigger podcast called Unravel with Natalie Denise. On that channel, I also do full-length exposés on the entertainment industry as we have known it. Visit the link to subscribe.